Okay. A warm welcome to all of you all. Thank you for joining our webinar today and taking time from your busy schedule. I'll be the moderator today. I'm Rajesh Chandrasekharan, and I work as Vice President of Technology at BukuWarung. I've worked in the industry in companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, uh, and a lot of the Indian startups like Ola, Flipkart for over 2 decades. Uh, Today, we have a very strong panel with us and a very exciting discussion on how to build customer-centric products at scale. And we'll take a couple of real-world examples from our fellow colleague industry leaders. And we'll do this through some interesting stories that they will share with us. Q&A will be at the end once all of this session is done. And you can type your questions at the end. I will announce a section where we can actually have questions and can be addressed to the host and panelist. And you can have anything that you would want the panel to clarify, in terms of building a startup or whatever you want, right? We have like Tridev is like a fairly seasoned entrepreneur and leader. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers today. Tridev Vasudeva is an entrepreneurial tech executive with a deep experience in hyperscaling e-commerce environments. Tridev started his career as an engineer at Apple and spent nearly 10 years at Amazon. And at Amazon, Tridev launched Amazon's version of Shopify called Amazon Web Store as a product and tech owner, and helped scale the business from 0 to 30K plus active sellers, driving nearly $2 billion in GMV. Later on, Tridev joined Coupang, which is South Korea's Amazon kind of a setup that went IPO in 2021 before the company became a unicorn. And at Coupang, Tridev launched a subscribe and save business that he saw scale very rapidly and fast, capturing nearly half of the diapers sold in South Korea in 9 months. That's pretty amazing feat. He also launched customer reviews on Coupang and eventually ran the entire marketplace, product and engineering for the company. And most recently, Tridev spent about 2 years in Vietnam as CTO for Tiki, which was an Amazon-style second largest e-commerce player with 2-hour delivery. And at Tiki, Tridev launched live stream commerce, and he was responsible for migrating Tiki's monolithic tech stack into cloud and microservices within a year. And that's pretty fast. Tridev has managed teams of 200 plus in ambiguous and multicultural global environments. So Tridev, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
We'll introduce our second speaker, Hariom. Hariom is the founding engineer at BukuWarung with a deep understanding of backend and mobile systems. Hariom started his career as a backend engineer at Works Application and spent nearly 7 years there. And over there, he launched a backend-driven layout designer and rendering engine that helped in achieving less than 100 milliseconds load time for complex ERP systems. He spent 3 years in Tokyo headquarters, where he interacted with multicultural clients, and later he launched a multi-tenant customer support system that was used by clients to handle their customer requests. At BukuWarung, Hariom launched the first version of the Android app. He was responsible for delivering lightweight, high-quality Android app and keeping BukuWarung availability at 99.9% since the beginning. He has played a vital role in scaling BukuWarung Tech to 50 plus members. Hariom, welcome.
Thank you, Rajesh, for such a wonderful introduction.
Okay, so let's get the ball rolling, and Tridev is going to be our first speaker. Tridev, I think I read your bio, and you have a very unique experience working at Amazon in the very early days of e-commerce, breaking out into US. And then you did the same thing in South Korea when e-commerce was just starting to pick up. And Coupon wasn't even a unicorn, right? So at both Amazon and Coupon, and even Tiki in Vietnam, we know that they are highly customer-centric companies. So can you tell us a little bit about what sets these companies apart? Like, how do you build experiences that customers end up loving, and in turn, like, I guess the next thing is to hyperscale those?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for a really wonderful introduction, Rajesh. I guess you're kind of really good at making the story. And I would like to welcome all the people. I cannot see the names of all the people, but probably from Indonesia to India to wherever else you are. I'm here in rural Pennsylvania, small town Pennsylvania, eastern US. It's around 8 a.m. in the morning. So I'll get right to your question. And I've kind of gone through that process of companies hyperscaling, and some of that happens. Usually it happens at a point where companies end up hitting one or two products in the sweet spot sort of zone where customers start really coming in, and they come back. It's also driven by external market forces many times where market is shifting. So at least from my experience, I'll give you a couple of examples. I think the best way I can walk you through what I saw or how I see that work, that really how these customer-centric products take off, would be through examples. One example I have is in South Korea. You kind of mentioned that. So I joined Coupang in 2015, and Coupang was not a unicorn. South Korean market, the e-commerce market, was growing rapidly. However, there was a fierce competition, similar to what you probably see in Indonesia and in a company like BukuWarung, where growth is phenomenal. But you have 3 or 4 fierce competitive players in the same space. Coupang was exactly like that. Coupang was 4th in market leadership. So our challenge, our interest, our desire was, how do we make this company unique? How do we differentiate Coupang compared to every other sort of e-commerce platform out there? One idea we had was, why don't we launch something called Subscribe and Save? Reason was Coupang was the only player with logistics footprints, meaning we had our own warehouses, we had our own drivers, meaning we had to take on inventory and manage and optimize that. So we wanted to know if at least for some percentage of our selection, if you could predict what people are buying, or if you could have subscriptions that would at least help in small number of consumables. So it was an idea that we wanted to experiment with. I was put in charge of building the team, building the project, building everything. I mean, there was a 1-person team when I started. I literally had a one-page document, and we started with hypothesis. Then why would somebody buy? And we had some more thinking around this. By that time, we had some sense of what kind of consumers are in South Korea. So we set out launching a simple weekly subscription service with 4 products. We actually had a rice. We had a ramen. Ramen is a noodle that's super popular, and people bulk it. People just it's a regular thing people buy. We had tissue paper, and we had a diaper. Quickly we realized people want flexibility in frequencies. We never wanted to force them to keep the subscription, so cancellation was free. We had to think about the whole package. There was a free returns, and we started pivoting. We realized that it's getting too complex if you offer too many frequencies. Just let people subscribe monthly basis. We started getting them into our user experience testing. We would observe them using the app from the different room. Usually, I mean, I literally directly work with the founder and the CEO, the bomb Kim, and it was just me, him, and one more person. Literally, we would sit through 4 or 5 of these. Just people who come in for a $10 Starbucks gift card, and we would watch them use the app. We would ask them some questions, and that'll be open-ended discussion. in that process, at some point, something interesting started happening. So we started seeing a pattern that women with younger babies were persistent customers. They were always there. Like half of our UX slots, or slots, what we call customer slots, were filled by these women. They would come in. Many of them had a young baby, and at times they were very emotional, or very attached to. They were like so happy, and I was literally taken aback that somebody can be so excited with a small simple thing. Like, they were like, you are giving me diapers that I cannot live without. I have such a young baby. It's like 5 months, 1 year, usually very early young, or small infant mothers, because you cannot run out of diapers for those of the people who have babies. So long story short, that was an interesting sort of aha moment for us. We saw that infant mothers really like our diapers. They actually, there's a convenience to this for them. So we started doubling down on baby products. We started cutting prices, and we basically decided that if we can get large number of these consumers, mothers in Korea are usually the decider of household spend, so we can capture a lot of wallet share. And we started like tailoring our entire service around these diapers, and infant moms. We would give them gifts. We would actually send our Kupang men would give extra service. They would actually go into at the floor of the building. They would actually send you a text message with a smiley when they leave a picture. So these small things, right? I mean, it started taking off, and then it all happened so fast. The fraud came with it, because we were so competitive on the price. We were so popular. It was actually so convenient for people to like bulk order. All the major manufacturers started discounting and offering like major brands with us, from P&G to Kimberly-Clark, which has the Huggies brand. It literally, the whole thing like really took off. We are scaling problems left and right. So I think this is what happened in our case, and with that it comes the problems. We invested in this, but I think so the essence of my story here is that how does this thing happen, right? I think eventually we did not know that this program will go so fast. We did not know when we started that this particular type of consumer would really take off. And it's once you have a large number of consumers sort of using the service, they try different things, and then more things become viral, right? So then another thing that happened was big water pallet delivery became super popular, to an extent that we had to actually control the quantity, because we started seeing injuries with Kupang, man. And we started seeing actually like delivery guys quit because there were so many orders, and they had to like go through the elevators in these tall buildings. Seoul is like a little bit like Tokyo, where or Mumbai, or any of these big cities where there's tons of tall buildings and skyscrapers. In fact, Seoul, everybody lives in one of those buildings, right? So I think the essence or the learning out of all this was that when you build a product, what we realized is that you must have a hypothesis. You need to know your territory. We knew that our territory is you're going to have a consumer subscription type model. So we designed an initial experience. After that, it's throwing darts at the board. I mean, it's literally like which dart sticks on your territory, right? And that happens when you try small pieces, small things constantly. At some point, somewhere, hopefully you'll get to a point where there is a connection. And it's not obvious, these signals when you're in middle of these. I mean, there are many, you look at surveys, you go talk to people, be closest to your customers, whoever, whatever you are. Are you a founder? If you are not founder, if you're an engineer, even if you're a guy who is just doing nothing in the company, the only thing you want to do is be closest to your company, a customer. That's where the secrets are. That's where the growth, that's where the interesting things happen. And eventually when you get to that value that, you would hopefully get to a point where you can kind of capture that product market fit and start seeing the scaling. And you get into monetizing as part of that strategy. But yeah, so that's my little first part of the story.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, that was a really interesting story. I mean, I could really connect to the moms and the diaper bit. So, I mean, really exciting stuff. Great to see that you saw it firsthand. You also mentioned, like, you helped scale Tiki for Singles Day in your bio. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what is Tiki, which market it was, like, so that our audience can also understand?
Sure. So customer centricity is of course, I think, the fundamental tenet or a fundamental currency for customer centricity is product, right? A good product, a convenient product, something that's value. But so that was my first story, right? How that happens. Now, the second real life experience that I'll share, this is actually a completely different problem. It's a classic e-commerce problem. It's about how technology, right? How, because many of us are engineers, and many of us kind of wear many hats in startups. Like, you're an engineer, you're a product guy, whatever you are. You eventually build a technology, and sometimes technology is actually the essence of why the platform develops a customer's trust. That's what my second story is about. So I'm going to talk about a classic e-commerce problem. This is a problem that's common also in financial exchanges, things like stock exchanges, backends of crypto or FX forex exchanges, where order flows are large and rapid. So e-commerce, one of the most important sort of characteristics of a good e-commerce website is you always know actual inventory and stock numbers, right? You have to be consistent and accurate when you sell something to somebody. In physical store, you can see these items in a small physical store. On a scaled e-commerce platform, you are doing this digitally. You must know exactly how many units you have across what warehouses, how far, right? This problem is a classic e-commerce problem, but it becomes a more complex and a difficult problem to solve when you are in Asian e-commerce markets, where a lot of e-commerce in Asia is driven by flash sales, at least in Southeast Asia. You have Singles Day, you have 9/9, you have 10/10. I mean, there are multiple of these. In Tiki's life cycle, there are like 4 or 5 of these, interestingly. And what happens is these are deal days. So deals open at certain hour. Large amount of traffic is driven on the website. And oftentimes there are few products, same SKUs on sale. So people try to buy like same iPad. And we had the same problem at Tiki. When I started at the company, we went through a few of these sales. In fact, we went through one which was like a pretty difficult experience for us, where we had literally like tens of iPads for sale, less than 100, at a very high discounted price. And we opened the deal at I think 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. or something in the morning. App push, or we actually had a mass app push to 4 million people. That would be probably 10 to 20% of the market in Vietnam. Vietnam is 100 million people, and most of the buying consumers are in 2 big cities. And if you send a app push to 4 million people in Ho Chi Minh City, you're covering like large percentage of your market. So what happened, right? We see traffic come in literally within 5 minutes of the sale open, and traffic, I mean, half of the site became very slow. Some of the checkout, some people experienced crashes. Net for just those tens of iPads, Many customers did not get the deal. Some customers were unhappy, and some, obviously customers, eventually we as a company oversold more than what we wanted to. So we had to honor all these extra iPads. We lost some money. So it was bad all around, right? So how do you solve a problem like this? What technology how do you approach this problem? So I think at Tiki, we had to solve this problem on a short footing. I mean, apart from the obvious answer of like, horizontal scaling of vertical scaling in the cloud and dynamically like providing more computing power, there was actually a software problem here because inventory was obviously stored in a SQL, and multiple services or components or modules were touching that inventory table, tons of locking on the SQL sort of rows, and that was kind of the essence of the problem. So obviously answer was, we need a microservice. We need to move any operational inventory in a centralized service. We designed the service as a sort of you can think of it as a journal or a log of any change to an inventory. So it was kind of a journal or a log, kind of a command log of anything that happens on an inventory on a SKU. So at least there was centralized authority for this data. Anybody from warehouse to a checkout to any client wanted to know or write or update an inventory had to go through the service. The elegant part of the design here was we had to support a very high throughput against absolute consistency, which is kind of it's against the cat here. It's technically not possible to do, right? So we had to, the service internally was, so we broke down the storage in two parts. There was a memory, there was a caching in the memory. We stored the actual state of the log of the changes in inventory at the closest to the CPU, and then asynchronously the state of the service, which was the state of the inventory, was asynchronously updated into SQL through a Kafka queue. The memory part actually had some very interesting architecture because you need very rapid updates and changes when there's like multiple throughput, right? So you don't want to. So we had to use a special library from Google. It's called Guava, which was sort of a native caching library that Google uses at very high scale because it's a very basic Java library closest to CPU. After some research, some of our engineers came with a very interesting idea. They actually picked a framework which is used in one of the financial exchanges. That's a design that produces sort of circular buffer in-memory queues. So these are essentially consecutive memory blocks. Because typically in a bounded like a queues like Kafka queues, you have you have locking on sort of the pointers that are first or last members of the queue or the size of the queue. There are multiple threads accessing that. They are not consecutively stored pieces of memory. God forbid they might be distributed. So there is context switching involved at all levels of your system, right? So there are, I mean, this problem is solved by different people, and we had to kind of adapt to it also. And I think that simple design, actually elegant design, worked very well, where we had in-memory caches, and then we had like this kind of in-memory buffered queues with a very small number of threads. And we could, I think we scaled at about, last I remember it was about, this kind of system could scale at like few millions of transactions per second, but we reached about 500-700K per second. So this is an example of, after we literally went through the Singles Day of 2019, after this system in production for a few months, and drastic change. I mean, the Tiki was known, like in Tiki, it was known to our category manager or customers that at the moment Tiki opens a sale, you're going to have a checkout problem. You may or may not get your deal. That went away. Drastic improvement. Like an example of good, deep technical thinking, right? It saves the day. I mean, it completely changed the perception. And on top of that, like we started selling so much more. So I mean, technology itself is enabler for customer centricity. It's not just about, I mean, product market. It's about trust. It's about leveraging the technology to provide that trust, the platform, the stability, right? So hopefully that kind of explains the both sides of the story, product and tech. That's pretty much all I'll speak today. I think I've spoken a lot, but hopefully that's an interesting bit of stories, I guess.
Yeah, Trizay, that was really exciting. I think the pattern that you mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, correct me, it's like an LMAX disruptor, I think it's called, like a circular queue. Very, very exciting stuff. I'll now switch over to Hariom. Hariom, I think you're on mute.
Okay.
Yeah. Hariom, your bio, you said like you're like the founding engineer of BukuWarung. So maybe you can talk us a little bit about your startup story. We see so much about it in movies. Movies are made about all these early days. People sitting in some bed or in their own closed room. Maybe you can tell us how you met the founders. How you guys went about meeting the customers in a completely different market, product market fit, anything at all, right? I'm sure you have a lot of interesting stories to tell.
Thanks, Rajesh. And before starting my story, I think most of people already know about BukuWarung. But to those who don't, BukuWarung is building digital infrastructure for 60 million merchants in Indonesia. And today we have around 6.5 million registered users in more than 750 cities in Indonesia. And we have processed around 1.5 billion digital payment transactions in Indonesia.
This is dollars, right?
Yeah, $1.5 billion USD overall. So these are some unbelievable number for a 2-year-old startup. And for us, this entire journey started in early 2019. So my founder Chinmay and I, we were a flatmate at one point, and I met other founder Abhinay through Chinmay. And we used to discuss a lot of startup ideas like most of us do. I'm sure most of people who are in college, they discuss a lot of these ideas, but we never executed anything. So we had a few ideas, but we never had courage to execute those. And when we used to travel to Indonesia, so basically Indonesia is very close to Singapore. And a lot of people, when they start their first job in Singapore, they travel to Indonesia, Malaysia, these countries. So when we were traveling to Indonesia, we noticed a strange pattern of people using paper more than their phone. So whenever they have any transaction or dues, they would record it on paper. They would write it down. And for someone like us who use Splitwise for every small transaction, even if it is a $1 transaction with your friend, you will Splitwise. It seemed very strange. Why would anyone record something on paper when they have phone? They can record easily it on phone, and they would have a weekly, monthly summary kind of thing. So we deep dived into this problem, and we spoke to around 100 merchants during our trip. Basically, we are speaking to everyone whenever you meet. And we also spoke to some of our local connections. So basically founders were working in their previous company and they were expanding in Indonesia. So they had a lot of connections in Indo. And what we realized was most of these merchants were doing it out of habit. Like they were so used to pen and paper, they don't think about anything else. And for other segment, it was mostly because they don't have any other more convenient way. So it is more convenient for them to grab a piece of paper, write it down. If they have a transaction, they will write it down and reconcile it later in the night. So even if they have to prepare a weekly or monthly report, it is better for them to do it manually as compared to using any technology. So for us, that clearly shows how underserved this MSME market is. We have so many technology advancements, but these people are still using pen and paper. If I ask any of you, like remove splitwise from your phone, it would feel very weird. Oh, why would I record everything on my notebook? And for these people, preparing weekly, monthly report manually was more convenient. So keeping all of these problems in mind, we started preparing our MVP. So MVP was very simple. Basically, guys, it was like that app could provide you functionality like recording dues on your phone. And if you schedule a reminder, it will send a reminder to the person who owes you money. So these are the only two functionalities we had. And it just took us 1 week to build this app. And immediately when we built this app, our founders organized a community event with the merchants in Indonesia. And to be honest, we were dreaming of something like Apple or Google event where they launch any new product. They have a fancy event. Entire world is watching them. But kind of budget we had, we just went with a room where 60 odd merchants were there. We gave them demo of our product. So basically founders were giving demo and I was, while I was fixing the bugs. And immediately after this event, we asked them to try our app. And surprisingly, most of these merchants loved our app. They actually, we hit on the point where we delivered exactly what they were expecting. And some other merchants shared exceptionally good feedback to improve our app so that it is more convenient for those merchants. So we included all of those improvements, although it took a lot of time for us, but we tried to wrap up everything in 2 days. And immediately after adding those improvements, we launched our app on Play Store. So for me, it was first launch in Play Store. I never launched any other Android app. And I was very scared because the approval process is around 4 days. So every day I was checking, is my app approved or not? And I was scared if what happens if it gets rejected. But after 4 days of waiting, it went live. And immediately after that, we called each other. We thought, oh, app is live today. We'll have a lot of transactions today. Then we checked our product metrics later in the night. So in first day, we had around 50 transactions. And surprisingly, most of these transactions from the merchant that we met on the ground. So we thought, oh, we have solved the problem for these 50 merchants, 50, 60 merchants. But how to scale further? But what we noticed during the next week was these merchants started sharing our app in their network. And we didn't imagine this network is so strong. So some of these merchants have 20,000 other merchant records in their phone. So they're shared with every one of them. And what happened was in next 2 months, we got around 5K merchants with 94% monthly retention. So these are some unbelievable number for us. 94% monthly retention is very huge for us. So we didn't spend anything on marketing for first 2 months. And basically these merchant was our first team of marketing. They will share in their network. And for them, actually, it was like they explained their idea to us. And we built an app on top of their idea. We launched it on Play Store. Now from merchant point of view, it is like they explained the idea. That idea is sitting in the Play Store today. So they would definitely share it with everyone in the network. Oh, see, this is the idea I shared, and today it is on Play Store. So it was like that, and they have shared in their network. We got very good 5K merchants, and these merchants actually created a fan page for us in Facebook, where they would ask questions like, "What is the next feature you guys are going to build? How to use this feature? How to share reminder to my other merchants?" So this Facebook fan page is kind of showing us excitement from merchant point of view. They are waiting for new features. So biggest takeaway from this entire journey for me is we should listen to our user feedback very closely. These are the people who will be your first very exceptional set of product managers and first set of marketing team you can hire. And their network is much stronger than Facebook marketing team, Google marketing team. Once they share with their network, other person will definitely download and they will explore the app because they have competition of, oh, this guy is also merchant. He is selling clothes. I'm also selling clothes. How is he getting more profit? So this kind of marketing team is very helpful. Although we didn't hire them, these are out of curiosity. They wanted to join. They wanted other people to join same app. So yeah, this was a great learning for me in this entire journey.
Hey man, Hariom, that was very interesting. I think I can definitely, I'm sure a lot of people can connect to the Play Store anxiety once you submit. I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people. And also like 94% monthly retention is a fairly good number. So it's good to see that you actually seem to be hearing your customers and building the right products. Uh, but I'd also like to
very
understand.
exciting story.
Yeah. And I'd
Okay.
also like to understand, from a tech point of view, like, a lot of what you said is, hey, I'm taking customer requests and all that. But as a tech person, I'm kind of curious, like what problems were solved, what tech stack you used, what trade-offs you made, like how do you kind of go about building this entire thing?
So tech stack was very difficult for me to decide. Actually, for me, whatever company I worked in previously, I worked on projects where tech stack was already decided by someone else. So I think most of people do that. So we already have a tech stack. We would work on top of that. And if you're lucky, you would get chance to work on something like migrating from old tech stack to new tech stack. So this is my background where I didn't know how to decide a tech stack from scratch. And we had pressure of building a product as an MVP. So initial tech stack that we decided was based on problem we are solving and my own expertise and also time to market. So for us, we were building a lightweight bookkeeping app that should work in offline mode. And it should also have a very good performance on low-end devices. So most of these merchants had low-end devices. So for front end, to me, the choice was pretty obvious. Maybe for someone else, it won't be that obvious. But I decided to go with Android native app built on Kotlin. And reason was we were building an offline app. So Android native provides you a offline storage with SQLite that has ACID properties. And also it provides you very good performance. There is no other method that can outbeat these Android native apps. Web app has very bad performance and we are building for offline. So front end, we decided Android native with Kotlin. And for backend, we needed a system that can take user data backup. Also, it can do scheduled reminder for someone who owes me money. So these are, usually these are some infrequent tasks that we have to perform. So for me, the choice I made was serverless Node.js backend because the nature of infrequent tasks. And it helped tremendously in reducing our development cost as well as time to market because you don't have to manage the infrastructure. This is very challenging for a backend engineer, managing the infrastructure regularly while developing new feature. And it also gave us a very good insight into how to think about your future microservices, where these services will be independent because in serverless Lambda, everything is independent. They maintain their own state, they maintain talk to database in their own subsystem. But sadly for us, that future of microservices, it came very early. Like within 4 months, we realized the kind of traffic and performance we are looking at. It is not sustainable on serverless. So this was the first tech debt that I paid, basically moving all of our backend API to Java-based Spring Boot microservice. And it was very difficult actually, but we did it within 1 week because this is the ask for moment where we have to deliver best performance. Okay. And at that time, I was also not sure, is the Java-based microservice, this is the right choice or not? So I consulted many of my friend and advisor. So we had advisor at that time from Microsoft, Flipkart, and Google. And so I used to speak to them a lot, like, oh, this is the choice we made during MVP. And now we are going to make choice of Java and microservices today. Will it be sustainable in next 6 months? So now was the time when you think about today and you think about 1 or 2 years in future as well. So your system should be scalable. So I took a lot of advice from these people. I have to speak to them 2-3 hours a day. And luckily our system worked very well. And we had defined a lot of monitoring related stuff on top of that. And biggest learning for me from this entire tech stack decision is for a lot of startup founding team, they don't know how to decide a tech stack. So for MVP, it is okay to use shortcuts. It is okay to use shorting the process for speed. But if you want to make a scalable system, you would need a engineering process. You would need some engineering excellence to make sure your system is scalable. Okay. So we changed a lot, and I took help from a lot of experts on the subject. So before deciding our current architecture, I spoke to a lot of people.
Hariom, I think you mentioned a little bit about some of the engineering excellence. Can you tell, like, like operational excellence, engineering excellence, these things? What about things like, CI/CD? How much of it you did? Like, what are some of the pitfalls of your architecture? Maybe what would you do differently now that you're much wiser and with a lot more mistakes? What is it that our viewers can take away? Like, how should you have gone about it?
Okay, so for us, one of the most unusual choice I made was having CI/CD and automation from early days. So we invested a lot in automation and CI/CD. For some of the people, it might feel like as a startup, why would you care about CI/CD? Why don't build new features that customer can use? But I think indirectly CI/CD and automation, these things help your merchant. Basically, you will ship better quality product at a faster speed. So since our early days, all of our build to Play Store went through our CD pipeline, and every build you can save around 15 minutes. And it's not like in one release you'll only do one build. You would do around 6-7 builds, or in worst case you can do around 20 builds. So that worst case also I have seen, where you have to do 20 builds. And this is not a good strategy to not invest in CI/CD and always do manual builds where you are waiting for a build and then uploading it to Play Store. This is a lot of manual work, and you can invest this time in actually building some feature that user would use. And if you don't have feature to build, then you can improve the product quality. So that's why we invested in this. And today we have around 6 user facing apps and 10 backend microservices. So you can imagine these services are not built on shortcutting the process. It is almost impossible. So you have to focus on a lot of engineering processes and excellence. And today we have a weekly RFC process where any major change that is going into the system, we do enough brainstorming for that to make sure all the edge cases we cover, and we have a proper code review process. And for API, we have around 70% automation. So initially, none of these was there. And slowly, when we are building a system, and this is what Tridev also talked about, like customer focus is not just about developing new feature, it is about creating a stable feature. And when you are in fintech domain, you have to make sure your quality is good, and your whatever data you store, it is consistent, and user shouldn't be disappointed with them because they won't trust you again. So we have invested in these process. We have API automation. So any new release, we would check nothing that we shipped previously should break. So this is how we invested. And for us, engineering excellence comes behind developing new feature and making sure we listen to customers. So we also developed a customer support tool where customer can register their problem and they can also talk to our support team. So yeah, this is two things that are not directly visible to customer, but we invested in those to make sure we serve our customer in the best possible way.
But Hariom, I think in the interest of time, we are down to maybe last 15 minutes, and we had promised to give our audience a chance to ask any questions. So in this segment, if you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask, please post it, address it to the hosts and panelists, and then I can route that to Tridev and Hariom as appropriate. I'll give a couple of minutes for folks to post their questions. Are folks able to type out the questions? Okay, so here's a question. So how do you hire for startups in the early days? Any tips on that? This question is for Tridev.
Yeah, I think you were cut off a little bit, but the question is, how do you hire for startups in early days, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think so. Hiring is something that depends a lot more on there's definitely a stage centric hiring that you need to understand. Um, what I would generally prefer to see is if you're an early stage, forget pre-seed. I mean, if you're talking about pre-seed or a seed or Series A, you're essentially hiring for or somebody who's going to literally build just like Hariom explained, right? A person who can actually come up with a stack, can stitch all the components together with maybe a couple of other people, write all the code. So these are the true builders, right? I mean, so in the earlier stage, you're really looking for that type of people. So you go where they are. You participate. I mean, of course, your own network and all the traditional channels, but um, you go to Stack Overflow, you go to GitHub. You can do offline channels, but traditionally, recruiting is still, this is the interesting part. I mean, like I call this, eventually recruiting is a human science, right? So it really matters how your initial few hires, uh, you are going to be very chaotic up to, it's even if at Series C, because it's, I mean, these startups are like, they go through series of chaos cycles, right? So how you treat your earlier employees, they will bring you other employees. The referral, the human science of recruiting is essence to all this. But I think generally focus on actual nuts and bolts builders, early stages. Focus on people experiences. Whether you like it or not, network referrals are even at later stage the most powerful thing you will find. Build your brand with like Buku. I think Buku guys are a great example of, and I've seen some other startups in Indonesia and Asia doing it. Those are the secondary layer of activities. You do need a brand. Your investors will help you do that also. But really, it's actually at the end of the day, find those first builders, bring them part of your process, give them equity, and they will build the team for you. There is no other answer to it. Yeah.
Got it. So a few more questions coming in. Hariom, I think you're on mute. I have a question for you. Does being a generalist engineer help when you're part of a founding team? Like, what has been your experience?
Yeah, so in my experience, being a general developer helps because you know about front end, back end, and all you care about solving a problem. So you don't care about expertise. Basically, I'm a backend developer. I can just build backend, and I need help from some front end. So it really helps where you can think about user problem and you use your basic knowledge of how would you think about a problem. You don't think in terms of front end, back end of data or data engineering. Just go behind a problem. And for me, it helped a lot. I worked on front end, back end a lot in past, and what we delivered was
I think I'm
general
getting.
engineering problems.
Sorry, somebody said something. Okay, yeah, continue.
Okay. Yeah, so for an engineer, it should be solving about a problem. Basically, you heard about customer views. Now you might have to learn sometime Android or front end. Then you might have to work on back end. Also, you might be think about some data pipelines. So being passionate about engineering always helps. And being a general problem solver is a must for a founding team member, in my opinion.
Got it. So here's a question. Either of you or whoever wants to take it can take it. Like, how do you scale legacy system? How do you improve the architecture while maintaining the legacy? I think which of you wants to take that? I think Tridev, you had to deal with that a lot more, moving from a monolith to microservice. I think you mentioned.
Yeah, Rajesh, would you please repeat the question? I think I actually
Yeah,
got disconnected,
got
but I'm back in.
Yeah. So how do you scale a legacy system how you improve the architecture while maintaining the legacy.
Yes, I went through a real life experience of this at to some extent at Kupang, but more so at Tiki. Although the engineering team I had experienced in Vietnam was really good. I think Tiki, I was fortunate to be surrounded by, like, I talked about one of the architectures. I mean, some of the excellent engineers. It's so usually you have to go back to the drawing board on where your needs are. Usually you're going to have a piecemeal approach, where you're going to do it one component versus the other, and you would go through the ones that require the most, sort of where the biggest pain problems are. You would start with those first, because when you're migrating from a legacy into microservices, usually it's better to take the hardest problems heads on, so that you know all the surprises up front. One strategy, one symptom you will notice. I mean, it takes some. This comes with some experience, but one symptom you might notice is where you're usually where your biggest problems are in terms of like either it's availability or a latency pain or things breaking. It points to some form of data scaling somewhere. So more than often, you might end up building that, like migrating that first piece of big monolithic SQL, for example, into one or two services with diverse data sets, and that might solve like big chunk of a problem, but that's the hardest problem to solve. So usually what I would say is, you need to identify your bottlenecks upfront, and embrace them, because usually it's you will be pretty clear on, like, it's usually related to big large number of data growing in some parts of your system. The physical architect, like a hardware scaling, is easier problem. Cloud migration, we were in a very unique situation where we had to do this so rapidly. I mean, it was a question of survival for us, but I would actually not recommend it. It gives you more negotiation leverage also. Designing microservices totally can be done step by step. I mean, do not overdo this. Like Hariom is saying, I really like this point that early on, I mean, simple is better. I mean, in general, in life and in software, simple is better. So
Got it. The next question I have is from, I think, editor Benjamin T from 2plusfertility.com. For companies starting with a smaller scale e-commerce, a SKU less than 10, which tech stack do you recommend for a good analytics foundation to scale? Which one of you wants to take that question?
let's try Hariom. I mean, Hariom is the guy. Yeah.
Although I thought Tridev has worked on e-commerce a lot.
Okay.
But for SKU less than 10, I think you don't even have to worry about tech stack. So whatever you are comfortable with, you should think about that, because at early stage, it is very easy to scale what you are expert in. It is very difficult to learn something new and scale it further. So in my opinion, you can choose a tech stack based on your own comfort zone. So if you are comfortable with, let's say, Java, then you can build your backend with Java, and your front end, whatever your users are asking for. So you should connect with your user. What are they expecting? If they're expecting an Android app, then try to build a very good experience on Android native. If they're expecting a web app for e-commerce, although I think web app is always a good idea, because you can scale.
I think the question is saying for a good analytics foundation to scale. So I'm not completely clear, but probably means like maybe like BigQuery. I mean, what are like analytics?
For analytics these days, there are a lot of tools, like Firebase Analytics is one of them. Amplitude is one that we used in part, and they give you very good insight. But if you're really good with the queries, then go ahead with BigQuery. because in future you might have to write your own notebook where you can get some suggestion related to product. So for product and SKU, it is very important that in future you can define the categories based on what inputs you are getting from user. So in my opinion, I would suggest GCP, where you can use BigQuery and Jupyter Notebook for analytics. And if you are just looking for product analytics, you can look at Amplitude, Firebase Analytics. These are really good. And initially you don't have to pay a lot. And for 10 less than 10 SKU, I don't think they will charge you at all.
Okay, I think we are almost out of time. One last question I'll take, which for Tridev, can you talk about what is the ideal like PM dev QA ratios that we should maintain, or is there any notion, and at which point would you recommend that we get into all this when building a startup?
Sure. So yes, I think that's a question that I get quite a lot, and I've seen sort of different variations in PM dev ratios. Generally speaking, I would just tell you that when you see too many product managers or product people and less developers, you worry, right? I mean, something isn't. If you want a number, anything, less than like 8 or 10, I worry. If I see too many managers, I worry even more. Even though I'm one of them, but I'm very hands-on type. I'm myself very hands-on. I mean, I go and write design screens at times. So, so generally speaking, at our earlier stages, you could get away with 20 to 25. I would invest on hiring 3 to 4 heavy duty, hardcore PM guys with experience. As a founder, you're kind of provide a better opportunity, better compensation for these type of people. But it's better to do that and have 1 or 2 associate PMs or BAs attached to them, and sort of like team of 30, 40, rather than have tens of shallow product managers. Product management is a profession that's learned largely by doing it. It's one thing that would be very hard for an AI to replicate. It's a human craft per se, right? So it's extremely important that you get 1 or 2 good ones. These people are galvanizers. They will train others. They would actually influence your engineers. They will influence the leadership. They will learn the customer sometimes more than you. So my general answer I'll give the real life example of this would be, we had in Kupang, in Subscribe and Save, we had a team of about 25 or 27 engineers, and we had basically 2 PMs. One was me PM, and I was leading the whole team also, and PNL, and then I had 1 more PM. And then we had, at some point, we had like 3 of us, PM wise. One person was like more of a UX centric. At Tiki, when I joined, we had about 90 plus engineers, and we had maybe 4 or 5 PMs, which were like real PMs. And then, there were like 8 or 9 or 10 of these associate PM types. And by the time I left, when team was 250, our seller engineering, for example, was run by 3 PMs. One guy with tons of experience, he was a director, still there. And then we had 2 more junior PMs, and they ran probably 70, 80 engineers. I mean, there was enough clarity and roadmap in there that we didn't, we were always hiring, but we were selective. We could be selective because we had some meaty PM product guys in there.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. I think it was a very engaging session. I hope our audience also loved it. We will be prompting for feedback so that you guys can let us know what went well and where we can improve. But it was a really engaging session with Tridev and Hariom. I also learned a lot in that. I hope it was insightful for you guys. Thank you all. And as promised, we want to end up in 1 hour. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. See ya.
Thank you, everyone.